What's going on, everybody? It is the one and only Q here from Retro Q Gaming. But today, due to technical malfunctions and whatnot, well, we are joined, and I am replaced, in fact, by our special correspondent here. Now, unfortunately, this is terrible timing. First off, of course, I do want to say welcome to our 58th episode of our Quack experimental podcast. Unfortunately, there was none last week, mainly because first off, there was very little to talk about, which I could have stretched out a little bit. But at the same time, I was completely bollocksed when I sat down to actually do this, and I just wasn't able for it. And in the meantime, there have been technical malfunctions. So here we are. But anyway, this is this is a very fitting and great start to. I can't really say the new year, but this is a great start to my 34th year, because as of the night this is uploaded on my 34th birthday. Go me, happy birthday, and great start apparently. Yay. But anyway, having said all that, we do have some good stuff to talk about. So of course I will let our quality, knowledgeable, logical correspondent take over for this entire one. Now, we'll have to see what he says here, because I know he's going to talk about AMD first off. So, we have AMD. Currently, of course, we're going to mainly talk about next-gen Zen 3 chips and their CPUs, mainly because they have been announced that they will work in what we can only call a consumer-friendly move. They will work in 400 series chipset boards. Now, this is great news and is a little bit of a backtrack on something AMD did and said recently, because about 2 weeks ago, actually I suppose at this point it's closer to 3 weeks, AMD actually said the opposite. They said that the new stuff, the Zen 3 stuff, when they do come out, will be socket AM4 and only work in x86, X570 and B550 chipset motherboards. Now they're changing all of that 3 weeks later, and they are going to allow the upcoming Zen 3 chips, when they do ever arrive, God knows whenever it is. Hopefully it's before I build my new computer. Then we'll have even better stuff. Forget the 3900X, then let's give me a 4900X. But anyway, so we have these ones are also now going to work in the X470 and B450 boards. Now this all is thanks to and is facilitated by a beta BIOS update. Now, there are some trade-offs in order to do this. This beta BIOS update will disable some features on the board and the chips and whatnot, but it will also disable old AMD CPUs. This is probably early Ryzen CPUs or very possibly just basic models. However, they have not given a list and they have not said what models as of the time of recording this. Granted, in the meantime, when all this is kind of finalized and closer to release of the actual chips and when they're announced, we might have a little bit more info. Now, overall, this is a great consumer-friendly move, if you ask me, because it's good when you can just upgrade your CPU every few years if needed. I'll give you a great example of that now in a minute, but it's brilliant if it's the same socket and it works on either newer, or not so much newer, but it works on older chipsets in that regard. Because instead of replacing your whole motherboard just to replace your CPU, possibly even the RAM, and not to mention the absolute nightmare of a hassle of replacing a motherboard, it takes away the fact that typically it's not worth it when you think about it in some ways. And it's actually part of why I only upgrade every 4 to 5 years, because I wait to the point where my CPU is no longer cutting it. Although technically, I mean, using the computer I'm on now, technically I've never run into any CPU limitations on anything I've ran on this one. It's just currently all GPU because, well, my 1080 Founders Edition is showing its age a little bit. But anyway, this is why I kind of wait 4 or 5 years, and instead of just upgrading the motherboard, because realistically, when you upgrade the motherboard, you're probably looking at upgrading most of the PC at that point. So typically I will build a whole new PC. So I'll buy my new motherboard, whatever CPU, I'll probably kind of get it in around the same time and go with the GPU and the power supply, new case, yada yada yada, all these fancy SSDs, And boom, suddenly I have 2 or 3 quality gaming computers. Yeah. And there's also one other reason why I act like that when I'm doing new computers and stuff. That is Intel and their damn CPU sockets, which AMD is not following in this regard in this case, and is really good and really consumer friendly, and I am all for it. In fact, in case you haven't been keeping up with it, my new computer that I will be building later this year is likely going to be well, it's pretty much a given, it's pretty much a guarantee that it is going to be a Ryzen 3900X. But of course, we could have a 4900X in the meantime, and that's going to be that. And then of course we'll get a proper motherboard for it, and we'll get a 3080 Ti, and well, annihilate everything, because that is how I queue. But speaking of how I do and how I queue, well, we have Halo 3. That's right, Halo 3. Now, Halo 3 has actually already done a closed beta test, believe it or not, a closed flight, as they call them. But next up are the public flights. And this one is coming hard and fast, because this one is going to be test flighting publicly in early June, which, well, by the time this video, well, I should say, I can't say by the time you actually see this, but on the day this is uploaded, yeah, it is tomorrow. Now, of course, it's not going to probably happen on June 1st, but it's early June, so it's probably going to happen within like the first 10 to 12 days, which is fantastic. And given the fact that this is a public flight and how they've handled public flights for the last couple of games, hopefully I get in. I'm almost certain I'm going to get in, because I'm really hyped for it. I'm really, really excited to play some more. Halo 3 has obviously never come to PC. Neither did Halo Reach until the Master Chief Collection, I guess. But technically, Halo Combat Evolved and Halo 2 have already been on PC. I realize it wasn't the anniversary editions and the remaster and whatnot, but Halo 3 has never officially been on PC. So I'm looking forward to that, especially. Well, not just especially, but just because I love Halo in general. It's great stuff. And not only that, but just fairly recently, they've also showed off some current progress on Halo 3 and how it's going. And it looks great. I remember when I played the Halo 3 and the Master Chief Collection on the Xbox One X, it actually held up pretty well. It almost felt like they did basically nothing, just maybe touched up one or two, I won't say minor textures, but they did minor texture work, if you will, and just increased the resolution. It just naturally looked good, and good enough, at least in that regard, with what they were doing. And on top of that, to make me extremely excited about it, if it follows Halo, Halo 1, or well, Halo Reach, Halo 1, and Halo 2, if the beta test goes well, and it flights well and whatnot, it might be released 1 to 2 weeks later, which is very, very good for me. Although, given release timings and whatnot, I might have to get through Xenoblade at that point. As long as, well, that's something else. That's for another topic in this episode. But speaking of topics and episodes and whatnot, we are back to G2A. It's been a while since I've talked about G2A, but they're back in the news again for, well, kind of an important reason to talk about. Now, the reason why they're back in the news is after last year's kind of PR move and whatnot, where they tried to defend themselves and they said that any illegitimate keys sold through our store, we will refund and we will compensate the developer, and we will pay 10 times the cost of chargebacks to developers. Now, this is important because typically you could sell a key on the grey market, the third-party sellers and whatnot, and, well, when it does go through and all, people could kind of, well, basically charge back and cancel the transaction. And not only would that obviously take the money back from the developer and whatnot, but it would also incur a chargeback fee on the developer. So the developer would actually lose money, not just lose the money of the sale, but they would lose additional money. It's not like if you buy something for €20 and then they refund the €20, obviously you're back at zero, but there would be a fee on top of it. So they could be down to like -10, and it was essentially a loss. And of course, because of all of this, many indie developers were encouraging people to not buy their games off G2A, and in fact, they were even encouraging people that they would rather see them pirate the games rather than buy them off these websites where stuff like this can happen. Now, of course, there was a big stink about this where G2A came up with the whole thing we're going to talk about here. But really, only one game developer took them up on it, at least in any notable form. And this is the game development studio that created Factorio. It's called Woob Software, and they took them up on it. And so far, Woob Software have been paid I'm getting this wrong. They've been paid $39,600 for the sale of 192 keys on G2A. So when you look at it, 192 keys is $40,000. Now, of course, that is 10 times the chargeback fee and all as well, but it gives you an idea of how it is essentially. But you have to take something else into consideration. Most people are thinking, 198 keys, that's nothing. There's no problem there. They've probably sold, millions and 198 keys. Like, that's not even important. Now, it may seem like a relatively small number, but that 198 keys is out of 321 keys that were flagged and submitted as fraudulent by the developer to G2A. So when you look at it in relation to that, those 198 keys turn out to be 61% of the sales. Suddenly the number isn't looking so small and it's a bit more imposing, if you will. Now, I think it's also funny that, funnily enough really, that this whole PR spin and PR whatever it is and initiative has kind of backfired on them. After all, when you look at it last year, saying that they have this policy to encourage developers to sell with them and sell through them and all, and have confidence in their abilities and have confidence in their store, that they're not going to get charged back and ripped off. Well, saying all that and pretending to have this policy that you expect probably not to use an exorbitant amount of money or probably no one to use, it's all well and good. But when it comes to the cost of $40,000, suddenly it's not so much of an empty promise, and paying 10 times the cost of chargebacks is a little bit of a sting. Now, funny enough, on top of all this, this is why G2A are now changing said policy, and now they are only going to offer the full cost of the game and or chargeback to the devs, instead of the 10 times compensation. That really shows you where their heart is, if you will. Granted, they are a business, and of course businesses are out to make money, but yeah, this kind of good faith PR puff piece really backfired on them. But speaking of things that is backfiring on people and companies and whatnot, we've got GeForce Now. And if you're not familiar with what GeForce Now is GeForce Now is a streaming service that, in theory, will allow you to access all your launchers and your libraries via streaming. Think of Google Stadia and all that shite, but with games you already actually own. Theoretically, at least anyway, because GeForce Now, as we've talked about several times, has been getting off to a rather rocky start, with it finally coming out of its beta form and going into full release when it used to be called NVIDIA Grid and was changed to GeForce Now. Well, multiple developers and publishers have been pulling their games almost en masse from the service. So once it went into live, public, full release, well, the terms and conditions and whatnot for the beta version were different, and they varied, and they shouldn't have been carried over and incorporated into the full one. And publishers and developers felt like this, hence all their games being pulled off a lot as well. Now, it's a strange one, because now it is being, instead of opting out like it was prior, now with the new terms of service and all, these publishers and developers, it is a 100% opt-in service by default. So essentially, now games are automatically not supported until the developer and publisher comes in and opts in, if you will. So it's it gets even more strange, because this new agreement, this opt-in by default agreement, it only comes into effect on June 1st. And even though publishers and developers know this comes into June 1st, not every publisher and developer has it in place already at the moment to get their games automatically back on. So it's not even going to automatically default and carry over to the new system. So there are still going to be some games which will be removed today on May 31st. So that's a pretty important one. But overall, of course, these games can come back when new stuff is, new deals are inked and new terms and whatnot are reached. But overall, it's still another big blow to GeForce Now. And as much as I hate streaming services, just in general, it's just a terrible idea and terrible service and terrible quality and all. By comparison, GeForce Now is technically, if it's in the proper situation and a proper layout that it should be in and that they're aiming for it to be in, this should technically be the best one. Because it has the groundwork for it, at least anyway. The idea that you can stream your content, your games, whatever it is, from your computer, from any launcher that you already own, from any game on any launcher that you already own. That is how it should work. Now, before we just round out this quick little GeForce Now segment, since I did mention that technically this one, but as far as streaming services go, should be the best one, I've been hearing a little bit of kind of rumblings and whatnot about the upcoming Steam version. And if what I hear about that turns out to be true, and everything about it is legit, and, well, the Steam one is going to completely destroy it. But we have to wait and see. That's not confirmed from what I can find just yet. So next up, we're going to talk about some Epic Games. Wait a minute, not Epic Games, I mean Tencent. They're basically one and the same thing. Now, Tencent, of course, have bought a 20% stake in Marvelous Inc. So, Marvelous, of course, is another game publisher. And, well, I'm sure you probably know a lot of their stuff already out there at the moment. We'll talk in a little bit more detail in some of the IPs that you might recognize in a second. But this 20% stake in Marvelous now makes Tencent the company's largest shareholder. All of this was bought for 7 billion yen, which equates to $65 million. And the Marvelous IPs, well, certain ones at least anyway, include certain Harvest Moon games, Ruin Factory, Senran Kagura, certain Fate games, and it even includes some anime and stuff as well. Most probably prolific is Tokyo Ghoul. Now, so Tencent, of course, if you're not familiar, is a giant Chinese conglomerate who is basically funded by the government. And, well, they've made large investments in many different studios, many different publishers and developers and whatnot, including, but not limited to, because their portfolio is pretty big and we're just going to kind of talk about their more important ones. They own 100% of Riot Games. They own 80% of Grind Gear Games, 40% of Epic Games, 29% of Funcom, 5% of Activision Blizzard, 5% of Ubisoft, and 5% of Paradox Interactive. And of course, if you might remember a little while ago, where they invested in Platinum Games, but it was an undisclosed amount and just classified as a major investment in Platinum Games. Now, the thing about this is, how is all of this going to affect the company going forward? Well, I mean, we've all seen how Timmy Tencent and he'd like a word with you, and how his company has the strings pulled by China. But what they've claimed with this one is it allows them new technology, allows them access to new technology, new IPs. It will help with worldwide publishing and whatnot as well. Because now, technically, they're all in the one big group. So technically, you've got access to stuff from Riot. You've got access to certain stuff from Epic. You've got access to the IPs from Marvelous. You've got worldwide distribution and worldwide publishing and whatnot. We have to see how it will work in specifics, but the broad outline is there. Now, are we going to see the usual Timmy Tencent style stuff? Is every game going to require you to submit a hair, blood, and stool and semen sample just to play it? Well, if China has anything to say about it, I'm sure it will. But speaking of stuff on Epic Games and whatnot as well, we got some Quantic Dream stuff to talk about. Now, you might remember Quantic Dream have three more recent or more common, I don't even know what the word is, more higher profile games that have released when they lost. I can't even call them exclusivity because they were on two other platforms, but they were no longer on Sony platforms only. And Heavy Rain, Beyond Two Souls, and what was a PS4 exclusive, Detroit Become Human, all came to PC via the Epic Games Store. Now, all of these are now coming to Steam, as was expected and as was announced that they would eventually be coming to Steam. But interestingly enough about this one, is they're actually coming to Steam earlier than expected. They're all three of them are releasing June 18th. Now, currently, as of May 31st here, we still have no price on these games. When they did launch on the Epic Games Store, I believe they were €20 for Heavy Rain, €20 for Beyond Two Souls, and I think it was €40 for Detroit Become Human. They were in some part of a sale at one point where I think they were like 50% off or €10 off or something like that, regardless of the price. But it's going to be interesting, especially with the delay, to see if there's going to be some type of launch sale or bundle that helps them all come cheaper or whatever it is. Because remember, they did receive a large amount of money in order to put them on that store first. Now, the thing that's interesting about this is, remember I said they were all releasing on June 18th? Well, everyone expected, myself included, because of how pretty much almost all of these previous deals and underhanded, shady, under-the-table shit has worked. Everyone expected 1 year exclusivity for each game from the time of launch for each game. But that's not the case. The first one, Heavy Rain, released in June of last year. I don't remember the exact date. I think it was like the 20th or the 26th or something like that. Or maybe even the 24th. But here they are, all three of them, releasing the same time. Technically less than a year later on Steam. Very interesting. So the price is going to be... The price is going to be the big one, of course, here. Having said all that, I do recommend the games, or at least I recommend Heavy Rain and Detroit. Beyond is okay. I go back and forth on it. I will be buying these games on Steam, unless they just do something really crazy and fucked up with the price. But I will almost certainly be buying these games on Steam. I had access to, if you will, Heavy Rain, and I think I had Beyond as well. I definitely had Heavy Rain. Almost certain I got Beyond in a form, if you will, but I could never get my hands on Detroit. I got to play the demo, of course. That was on there. Speaking of which, all three demos are available on Steam. I highly suggest you check all those out as well. But we'll have to wait about 3 weeks, and we'll see how that one goes. But next up, what we want to talk about real quick is Disney, specifically Disney Plus, which, well, we all know, or you would hopefully know, is their streaming service. And of course, naturally, because it's the Disney streaming service, it has all the exclusive Disney content. They have a massive amount of stuff that they've owned based on what they've made themselves or acquisitions they've made over years and all that too. And it's pretty much exclusive to the point where you can't find anything else. In fact, some of it was never even released outside of it, like, say, The Mandalorian, which is a great Star Wars TV show. In fact, it's probably the best Star Wars thing since Episode 6. But there's a new rumor going around. And this rumor, at the moment, this time, is that a Kingdom Hearts show is in the works. And it's going to be released exclusively on Disney Plus. Now, I use the word exclusively because, well, what people don't seem to understand is if it launches on more than one thing, it is not exclusive. But because it will only launch on Disney Plus, it will be exclusive. That's how exclusives work. Now, apparently, it's all going to be CG. There's going to be no real people or anything in there as well. It's going to be all completely CG, including all the Disney characters, and, well, because it's Kingdom Hearts, it will pretty much have to be the Square Enix stuff as well. So they're not going to be real actors for the Square Enix characters. This brings up a real big, important thing. This gives all of those Final Fantasy and Square Enix characters mainstream media appeal. Now, I say this as someone who is a massive Final Fantasy fan and a massive, arguably, Final Fantasy fanboy. But this would be the biggest and highest profile coverage, if you will, that Final Fantasy and Square Enix would ever get in that regard. It's one thing to make games with Disney characters crossing over with Final Fantasy characters. It's a different thing to make a TV show about it, one that the normies will see. So that has possibly massive publicity and PR repercussions for Square Enix. In a good way, of course. And what is also important to notice, because it's probably going to be entirely CG, it's going to be made in the Unreal Engine. And this is no strange, or it shouldn't come as a shock to anyone, because believe it or not, like we mentioned earlier, The Mandalorian, pretty much all the CG and all that stuff that was handled in there, yeah, it was made in Unreal. Think about that. Think about that when you're looking forward to the next gen version of their engine, their 2021 version of their engine, Unreal Engine 5, Nanite, Lumen. Yeah, imagine that. But we can switch gears for a second and we can talk about Xbox Live. Now, there's so much to talk about, or so many variables when it comes to Xbox Live, but we're not talking about Xbox Live for the Xbox Series L. We are not talking about Xbox Live for PC, where it's completely free and you don't have to pay to play on the official servers. Ha ha ha. But we're not even talking about Xbox Live for the Xbox One, or even Xbox Live for the Xbox 360, which, believe it or not, is still going. What we are going to talk about is Xbox Live for the OG original Xbox 180. And we are talking about it over a decade after the original official servers were shut down. I still remember the morning that they shut down. I remember waking up and reading it, and boom, that was crazy just to think of something like that they were gone. Now, what are we talking about anyway when it comes to Xbox Live on the original OG Xbox 180 if the servers were shut off over a decade ago? Well, not so much new, but a team of indie devs have been secretly working away creating a replacement for Xbox Live on the OG original Xbox 180, and they're calling this Insignia. And if all this goes true and all this goes the way they want it to, it will allow users to play those games online again. It also requires no modding, no patches, anything like that for your Xbox. So in theory, you just put in the information and put in the specifics, and that's it. You would connect online and go that way. Now, of course, this is all highly detailed, I won't say classified, but very, very technical and very, very secret, and the encryption is all there and all too. And they're slowly working away on it for a while. The developers hope to have a beta test later this year in autumn of 2020, where games will actually run, select games at least anyway, so they can see how it runs online and how the servers and all handle it. By the way, that's autumn 2020, so for you Americans out there, that is fall, because, well, here in the real world, we name our seasons not based on leaf fall down, because, well, we're not stupid. But anyway, of course, all this is completely unofficial, but I think it is a great idea to give life to old games again. That's fantastic, if you ask me. I'm all about preservation, and the fact that Xbox Live original had been shut down and some of the stuff on there is not available anymore in any way, shape, or form, unless you have it stuck on one of your hard drives somewhere and something like that. I know I have some stuff like that on my Xbox, my OG Xbox 180. But we'll see. Maybe I'll test it. Maybe I won't. I do have a bunch of games that support it, of course, but who knows? Interesting developments, and I'm very, very excited, if you will, to see where it goes. But we're pretty much done here, and before we move on to the reason why everyone is really here every week, well, I just want to give everyone a quick reminder that the PS5 reveal, if you will, and we're not guaranteed to see the console, of course, but it may happen. We don't know if they're going to give the price away or anything, but they're going to show over an hour of gameplay footage and over an hour of what you can expect from PS5 next-gen games. Will be happening this coming Thursday at 9 p.m. BST. So naturally, I'm going to stream it. So make sure you subscribe and, you can come watch it with me. We'll experience the future and experience next gen together. And, well, we'll see if there's any 30 FPS games in there. Assassin's Creed will probably be 30 FPS on the console as well. Sorry, I had something in my, something caught in my throat there. But, of course, in relation to all of this, more importantly, Sony have went out and said that they do not plan to bring PS5 games back to PS4, meaning no cross-generational shite. True next-gen games, unlike the Xbox Series L, which has to factor in one of the worst consoles ever, both from a hardware point and just one of the worst consoles ever. The Xbox One, the Jaguar, the GCN Radeon GPU. Absolutely awful and shocking. But yes, that is it for the moment. Before we do go, we will hit up our best segment ever. Because, well, this is the reason why everyone comes and enjoys this little bad boy every single week. Q, what is up? What's going down? What's the 411? What is going on? What are you playing? Well, Final Fantasy VII OG is done. I never thought I could get any better at the game, but apparently I did. I mean, I do age like fine wine. Me and Bruce Willis, we're just on it like a car bonnet. But yeah, it's probably the best I've ever done in it. Best playthrough I've ever done it. The most easy and refined version of it. Of course, it's not a 100% one, but I highly encourage you to go and check it out. The videos are there and playlists and all, as well as Trials of Mana. Trials of Mana is done also. It is a decent game. It's very, very easy, I will say that. And they put in some new post-game content as well. It was very, very brief, kind of like one thing, if you will. And I went and did it. It was fun. It was enjoyable. I got a decent amount of time out of it. I will eventually go back and do at least 2 of the other main stories, because even though there's 6 characters, it's 3 stories. So you've got 2 characters sharing one story, 2 characters sharing another. So technically, you can see them all that way. But yeah, you get the idea. I'll go back to it eventually. Until then, I have Pokemon Black. I'm playing a little bit more of Pokemon Black. Hopefully, I can stick with it for the moment. I'm kind of drifting in and out of it, and it's not that I don't enjoy it, I just feel like maybe I'm not in the mood for it as I was when I started it again, or went back to it again. But I do want to do it eventually. Gen 5 is the only mainline series Pokemon game where I've never completed a mainline entry in it. And I do want to get around to it, because something like that is important to me. Back when Pokemon games were actually good. But other than that, the only thing I will say is at the moment I am planning on playing Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. The game did release 2 days ago. However, I bought my copy from Amazon. It probably won't be here till tomorrow, Monday, maybe Tuesday. But I've heard bad things. The tech analysis of it is out there and it sounds awful. We don't know how it's going to be just yet in real world applications, but it sounds awful in many regards. But we'll just see how it goes. I have to wait and see until it arrives. But other than that, the only thing I can touch on is very, very, very soon, hopefully very early this coming week, I will have my new Pack-a-Punch RGB SCART cable for my Wii, so I can play it on my PVM. That's right, one for the Wii. And the reason I'm getting that one is because, well, first off, I can play a bunch of Wii games on there as well. That's not the most important one, but there are a few I would like to go back to and do and whatnot. But the most important thing is because my GameCube is pretty much fucked, I can play the GameCube on it. I can play GameCube games on the Wii, on the PVM. And there's many, many GameCube games I want to do. So that is something that's going to blow up my retro stuff, my retro games and my retro gaming for a while. That's going to be sweet. I can't wait for that. But that is it for the moment. Of course, we are done for here, our 58th episode of our Quack Experimental Podcast. Of course, this was the happy birthday special edition, if you will. Go me. But until then, from myself, from our lovely little correspondent here, of course, to fill in my shoes when he can overcome technical difficulties that not even I can overcome. Well, a great thank you from all of us. Until then, of course, feel free to leave a comment about anything in the comment section below, whatever it is, whatever topic, questions, comments, butthurt, salt, praise, admiration, admonishment, whatever it is. It all fits down there. Anyway, until next week when we see you again for another one of these super duper, highly produced, high quality, hopefully with a new working camera, beautiful podcast episode. Well, feel free to hit the appropriate button to let me know how I did on the video, and while you're at it, why not head on over and hit the subscribe button and even ring our little notification bell. Because, well, granted, getting a notification from YouTube when one of these bad boys goes live is a whole other story, but hey, at least you can say you tried, am I right? As always, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the rest of the videos in my channel. And remember, winners don't play switch ports.